Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, we're back in the world of Marvel this week. How are you feeling?
We certainly are. I'm a bit warm, but other than that, we're cracking on with it.
No, 100%. We're back this week with part 2 of our Cube set review for Marvel superheroes. A link to last week's episode will be down in the show notes where we went over white, blue, and black. This week, we're going over everything else, and we have some bangers. A quick thing before we get into the episode. Down in the show notes below, there will be links to a card gallery if you want to see all the cards that we're talking about today, as well as a YouTube link if you want to see the pretty cards move around the screen. Check that out. While you're down there, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review. A thumbs up greatly helps us out. I think with that being said, let's just jump straight into the episode. James, take it away with our first red card. Take it away with Hawkeye, Master Marksman.
Yeah, this is a bit of a banger, actually. Hawkeye Master Marksman is 1 red for a 2/2 legendary creature human archer hero. It has first strike and reach. It has the ability Trick Arrows, which says, whenever Hawkeye becomes tapped, you may pay 1 up to 3 times. When you do, choose that many. So no, you can't choose the same one more than once, but you can choose 1, 2, or 3 of these abilities. So you can choose Net, which is target creature can't block this turn. You can choose Explosive, which is Hawkeye deals 2 damage to target player. Or you can choose Boomerang, which is discard a card and then draw a card. So this is a lot of really good text for a 2-mana creature. 2-mana 2/2 first strike is just often going to have a naturally good attack on turn 3. At which point, if you just have any mana spent over, you can spend that mana to make it hit for 4, which is pretty huge, or to rummage if your hand isn't great. And then later in the game, this is just becoming a little bit of a house, because it can threaten to get a blocker out of the way. Plus, if you ever do have the good attack with that getting the blocker out of the way, you're then unlocking a bunch of extra value with the extra damage and with the rummaging. That's just tons to get on a generically fine 2-mana creature. Also, even the reach is going to be pretty relevant, and also will be forgotten. This is some of the worst secret reach I've ever seen. I expect to see Malcolm attacking into this many times and being very sad.
It is an archer. We know that generally archers sort of have reach.
Yeah, this is true. Can shoot down some fairy masterminds. Yeah. I think this card's pretty strong, actually. It's not like the quickest of the red 2-drops. You know, there are some ones which have haste and whatnot. But in terms of sort of late game punch, this is really powerful. And the body on 2 is already generically pretty okay. So I expect this to show up in a lot of cubes. It's more of a sort of power level card than a synergy card, but it does get a little bit better if you have some of the discard matter stuff going on, because it does have that rummaging ability.
Yeah, I think that this card is pretty pushed. Like it's nice that the red pips aren't actually that intensive. Like you only need 1 red pip to play it, and then the generic, and then the 1 mana is of any color. That's quite nice, because I can see this doing quite a lot of work, not just in like a red aggro deck, but obviously the Boris aggro deck, or even like a Gruul monsters deck. It seems quite nice there. Like my gut is that kind of it's stronger in more like the classic aggro deck rather than like the 3-mana gut broadside deck that kind of red is doing now. Kind of like, because what's quite nice about it, as you kind of alluded to, is that early game it's just a good on rate creature. But then it's kind of a decent mana sink later on. Like those aggro decks will run out of cards, they will run out of mana. This kind of is quite good at pushing that damage through, and also like turning that 5th land in your hand into a lightning bolt or into another burn as well. So yeah, I think this card pretty solid. We already run similar things in Cube, like aggressive cards with a bit of rummaging or a bit of value, things like Robber of the Rich, things like Inti maybe. I'm not sure where this kind of lands on the power level of those cards. My gut is under Inti, somewhere around Robber of the Rich, but I think, yeah, a very cool card. I think it's going to see a bunch of play in some high-powered cubes.
Yeah, for sure. I'd certainly be looking to try this over, like Robbo, or maybe like Gao is one that shows up in a bunch of cubes. I'm looking at the Mitgo cube at the moment. It's got Hexing Squelcher in it. It's certainly a lot better than that card.
No, very true. Yeah. Definitely just a very generically solid card. All right, but we've done a Hawkeye. Let's move on to Hawkeye's Bow. This is a single red for an artifact equipment that reads: equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has reach. It has whenever equipped creature becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and it has equip for a single mana. And importantly, this is a common. And the reason we mention this card is because this is a combo with a card called Seeker of Skybreak. That is 1 green for a 2/1 creature elf that has tap it to untap target creature. So the gimmick with that card is if you can tap it, you can then untap it with its own ability. You can infinitely tap and untap it. How it works is you equip the bow to the Seeker, you can then tap it to untap it. When it becomes untapped, it will ping a damage. You can do that infinitely. And that's kind of why we're talking about it, because you don't traditionally get many infinite combos in Pauper. So this just existing is nice because it is nice in Cube to support your different types of decks, your aggro, your tempo, your mid-range, your control, and your combo. Having these in cubes leads to better balance. It leads to better games, I generally feel. And these kind of 2-card combos is generally kind of where it's kind of the best you can really do in Pauper. And just because Pauper only uses commons, it doesn't mean it's not a powerful format, especially for cubes that aren't using the Pauper ban list. And this is where I think that this will fit quite nicely. Individually, outside of each other, they're not really that powerful. They're not cards I would want to run by themselves. But in like a 360 Pauper cube or maybe a 450, a smaller cube where you're going to see the majority of cards, I think this existing is going to be nice. It just gives cubes a bit of an extra option, basically. What do you think, James?
Yeah, this is cool, I think. I think cubes gain a lot when you have combo as a strategy, even if it's not a huge part of the cube. It just gives decks another angle, and it adds a little variety to the gameplay of the cube, right? If combo is an angle that's available, and Pauper cubes tend to not have a lot of it, right? They have good value cards, they have good efficient creatures, they have excellent interaction. The things they tend to struggle with are combo cards, engine cards, expensive cards. And so this giving combo a little possibility there, I think, is quite cool. I will say, like, both the cards are quite bad on their own. So that's something to be aware of. It's probably better in a smaller cube, but I think it's fine in a 540 to run those 2 cards. There's not a ton of redundancy for either side. Like you can do 3-card combos with this card for sure, but I think it's fine to just run one of each in your Pauper cube, and there'll be a bunch of drafts where only one half is opened and it doesn't get there, but there'll be drafts where it comes up, and that's cool. I don't think there's a ton of other applications for this card. You could, if you're going off with a Devoted Druid, I guess it kills them with that. That's kind of funny.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, are there? Yeah, my knowledge of Pauper combos is not that intensive. I know that there was like Basking Brood Scale was there's a bunch of 2 or 3-card combos that there is not much redundancy for. So this kind of does follow in line with that. But yeah, both halves are anemic by themselves, I think, is the bottom line. But together, powerful combination. All right, we have one more card in red, James. Talk to us about Lady Spider Maybelle Riley.
Yeah, for sure. So Lady Spider is 1 red for a 1/3 legendary creature spider human hero. She has reach, and whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on target spider you control. So notably is a spider herself. This is not actually asking you to include other spiders in your deck necessarily. So this is kind of a 2-mana marauding Mako where you get +1/+1. Where you get 2 more toughness and you get reach. That's okay. It's worse than Mako for sure. But if you're really committed to those discard matter synergies, this is another way to get that sort of explosive growth that you do get with Mako, and the reach is nice. It's a little bit more resilient to removal before you've grown it. And yeah, this is the thing where it's not sort of mana gated in any way, and it's not when you discard 1 or more cards. It is 1 counter per card you discard. So For example, if you were to discard 3 cards through a Bazaar of Baghdad, you get 3 counters, which is what we like to see. That being said, it's 2 mana, so it's weaker than Mako. It doesn't... When you're not doing the thing, it's really, really bad. So you do have to be quite committed before you'd be willing to run this card. But for the right cube, this could certainly provide a little bit of redundancy.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think this is very much kind of like the second or third choice option in this deck, but it does just mean that we now actually have options, so you can go a bit more harder with it. Like, yeah, you mentioned Marauding Mako, but look, at the 2-drop slot, there's Evora, Insatiable Air, and Hobgoblin Mantled Marauder, which I think for a long time was called a different name on Mitgo, and I'm not going to look that up. But they're like similar sort of effects where basically the creature grows when you discard a card. Kind of like, I actually don't think Lady Spider... So this gives you counters, whereas the other ones... Whereas like a card like Hobgoblin is just an individual, like one-time buff per card, but that one has flying. And like Evora and Marauding Mako have some other utility to them. I think Lady Spider is actually like the worst of all of the ones that I've mentioned, but just having like another one that if you wanted to do discard in red, you really can now, because a bunch of those are also commons and uncommons. So we're kind of talked about like Madness as a deck on this podcast a few times, like red-black Madness or even red-green Madness you can do in lower-powered cubes or budget cubes, but just the actual just discard. You don't need the Madness cards really anymore with this archetype because Evora, Hobgoblin, and this are just solid cards, like sticking with a Faithless Looting, sticking with some other discard effects, and you've kind of got a deck. Like, yeah, your top end is like cards that care about you not having cards in hand. There's a bunch of those now. This seems like there's just enough now for it to fully exist as a fully fleshed archetype now, and I think that's very cool.
Yeah, for sure. This is very much a second tier, right? One, because all the best ones, right, are the ones where they enable themselves and their own little engine, right? Think of Inti, think of Evora. These are not cards that need that much support. They get better when you have the support, but without it, they're still good. This really needs the support.
Yeah, exactly. The other ones, I think, can kind of run as like a little package. This is more a archetype card, if that makes sense. We're doing it as an archetype. We're not kind of like sprinkling it into a cube, which has some discard stuff in it. So, but yeah, very cool one. I think, yeah, I think we'll see play. Right, we're moving on to green. Next up, we have Khazar of the Savage Land. This is 4 and a green for a 3/2 legendary creature, human barbarian hero. With, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands on the top of your library, and when it enters, create Zabu, a legendary 2/2 green cat creature token with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, put a counter on Zabu. So this is a cool card. It does a little bit of everything that a lands deck wants. It's an uncommon, and as we mentioned in the last episode, you don't get too many effects like that let you look at the top card of your library. And also being able to play lands from it is quite nice. Like, it's really good with effects that let you play multiple lands in a turn, which might be tricky at Peasant. And also, something to consider is that in more budget environments, we're not going to have things like fetch lands, which will really kind of go off with this card, because not only will they help us shuffle the top card of our library, they will also buff up the cat token that we make. But like, Peasant cubes will still have access to things like Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse. They printed a bunch of functionally similar cards over the last couple of years, as well as the cycle of Landscape Lands from Modern Horizons 3 they'd get in there as well. It just does so much kind of cool utility that the land Z deck wants. Yeah, I think a very cool card for budget or Peasant cubes. Certainly, like, for me anyway, why I think I like it is that it's just more interesting than just like a generic 5 mana 6/6 with trample. This kind of does more cool stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I think this is probably exclusively for Peasant Cube. Any cube where you're allowed to play rares, you just have way stronger green 5-drops, right? I'm not even really viewing this as a lands card. It's partly because I don't think the lands deck really exists in Peasant. I think you kind of need some rares for that deck to really pop off. But I think this is just a pretty strong value card if you leave it undisrupted. It's going to essentially just draw you a lot of cards throughout a longer game. It means you're not going to be top decking lands when you would be otherwise. You can just play them off top and dig to your spells. It's getting you some extra mana. and that token's going to start growing as the game progresses. Normally, the big issue with this would be the low toughness. 5 mana for a 3/2 is pretty horrendous. But the fact that if they do deal with this, and they'll want to deal with this, then they are leaving behind that 2/2, which will become a real threat as the game progresses. In cubes where we're allowed rares, this just isn't going to be powerful enough. Would you rather have like an Elder Gargaroth or this card at your 5-drop, right? It's not too close. But in Peasant Cube, exactly, I think it can be quite good because this is the sort of card we don't have amazing options for at Peasant Cube normally. That sort of longer term value engine can be really powerful in those cubes.
Yeah, definitely. All right. We have one more green card, James. This one, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think we'll see a fair bit of play. What do you think of Moleman, Molloyed Master?
Yeah, this one's cool, actually. So Moleman is 2 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature human villain. Says you may play lands from your graveyard, so it's a Crucible of World effect. And it has a landfall trigger. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green minion creature token named Moloid with whenever this creature attacks, you may mill a card. So this has a lot going for it. A Crucible of World effect that gives you board presence on landfall sounds generically kind of incredible. Like, that's everything you want, right? Giving the lands deck a repeatable source of blockers, like they could be 0/1s, it doesn't matter. The issue the lands deck has is staying alive most of the time. And this actually does a really good job of that. Just some trump blockers keep you alive while you're setting up your engine is great. Can also be interesting for like a Nardu deck. It's kind of a redundant copy of Springheart Nantuko in that deck, right? Obviously 1 more mana, but it does do the thing you need when you're going off with Nardu and Greaves. Plus, like, obviously Skull Clamp, it's pretty broken with. Lots going for this. That being said, this card is incredibly vulnerable to removal.
Yes.
It's a bit tough. 3 mana 1/1, not a super impactful ETB ability. That's a tough place to be in Cube these days. And there's a lot of ways to punish this. Like, imagine getting this card Bowmastered. Like, just want to concede and go home, It's gonna trade down on mana a lot. And that is, that's a way to lose games of Cube in 2026. But when it does live, it's going to be very, very powerful. So I think people are certainly going to try it. I'm kind of on the fence about this one for like actual powered cube. Are
you? Okay.
Like, listen, the power level when it lives is better than the other Crucible effects we have. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
But to a certain extent, like, I wouldn't be completely shocked if it turns out that it's better to have a slightly worse card that lives much more of the time,
Well, so like I still run Ramanap Excavator in my cube, which is 3 mana, 2/3 with the Crucible effect, and it doesn't have the landfall thing. In my head, this is just a straight upgrade because it does more of it does everything. Yeah, as you said, that deck wants. It gives you that whole board state, and also the tokens do mill you as well. That's also kind of what that deck wants as well. Like, it's finding you lands, or it's putting lands in your graveyard for you to then replay. It's one of these ones where like I like this effect on a creature. I don't just want all of them to be on enchantments or artifacts or rooms or whatever, because one of the strengths of green is that it does have a bunch of creature tutors. So if you're going for the more combo-y version of it, you can tutor this up, which is quite nice. You can tutor this and your Titania up or something like that. Like you it makes your deck a bit more toolboxy with your tutors, which is quite nice. Like, I don't think Random Excavator is currently in the Mitgo Vintage Cube, probably because it hasn't been 2026 yet, and this is kind of the version of that. But yeah, like this does eat all the removal. Like everything will kill it, but kind of like my guys is that it's just putting that pressure on your opponent, and if they don't answer it, then they're kind of boned.
Yeah, no, it's a very powerful effect. I agree. I think it's better than Excavator. I think it's worse than Ice Till. I think Ice Till's kind of cracked. I think if I was building like Powered Cube now, it would be Ice Till because it's the best one. Crucible, because like actual Crucible, because it's hard to kill. And maybe you get this in as a third one. I could kind of get on board with that.
That's fair. So I've got, I could say that. I'm currently not doing Crucible. I'm doing Walking Closet, which is the room one, because it does have a 5-mana one as well. But Crucible
cool.
Crucible does make me feel something a little bit more, if that makes sense. But it's more of a classic. But yeah. I think the fact that we're talking about it kind of in this conversation, I think means that kind of like it. I think it should be tested. I think it's just whether, especially actually, maybe Mitgo Vintage Cube, where because it's so board heavy, there's just a lot more answers running around. That might be a reason to not run it in the very high powered level cube, because if you have to answer all these aggressive 1 and 2 drops, your value 3 drop seems a bit at risk, basically.
Yeah, I'm a bit scared of the Pyrokinesises and the Orcish Bowmasters and the Venus, all of those cards. But
was it like Arc Trail and stuff?
Yeah,
like just ping a bunch of damage around. Yeah.
But having been said, like I wouldn't be shocked if it turned out this card's great because the tokens are so good, and you just suck it up. That sometimes you trade down a bunch of mana because it's so powerful when it lives. And it just works with more stuff, right? Like even if you don't have a good draw for your Crucible, sometimes this is just pumping out tokens for your Skull Clamp or whatever it might be, right? Or your Nadu, and that is a mode that the normal Crucible doesn't have, right?
No, I get you. Yeah, it's definitely one I think that is going to require some testing. All right, next up, let's keep it going. We're moving on to Multicoloured now. We have Cloak and Dagger Entwined. This is a 1 white and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature human hero with Death Touch, Lifelink, and when Cloak and Dagger enter, choose target opponent and tap up to 1 target creature they control. They reveal their hand, you exile a non-land card from their hand or the chosen creature until Cloak and Dagger leaves the battlefield. This seems quite a pushed card to me. Like, it does very much fall into the generically good category, which is not always what I want from my gold cards, but this does seem quite strong. Like, this is doing an effect that both black and white want. Letting you see your opponent's hand is incredibly strong. Like, hand attack is good, but a key part of that is just seeing what your opponent is doing. What is their next couple of plays going to be? Kind of like, it's breaking one of the fundamental conceits about Magic, in that my hand is sacred, you don't know what I'm doing. So just having that on this creature is very strong. But then being able to answer whatever the best thing they have, either in play or in their hand, is quite good. Like, if the best thing, like say you see their hand, if the best thing is on the board, basically, you can just run this out, I feel, because you're either going to get the best card from their hand that they're going to play in the future, or you just answer their best threat. And then on top of that, this is a 2/2 Death Toucher, which will hold you down, which will hold down the board quite nicely. I don't have too much else to say, because I think this is just generically strong. Like white and black both want these effects. Like, it is expensive for a hand attack spell. It does mean they can go under you in maybe higher power level cubes where they're trying to, well, actually, I guess that's the nice thing about this card is if they go under you, you can get the Grizzlebrand once it's in play, not when it's in their hand. Yeah, cool card. What do you think about Cloak and Dagger, James?
Yeah, this one's pretty pushed. It just has so much flexibility, right? Like Fiend Hunters is already like not a terrible effect. It's just bad in a bunch of matchups, right? And this kind of removes that, because if your opponent isn't playing to a board with cheap creatures, which is where you'd kind of want your Fiend Hunter classically, then you get to attack their hand instead. Listen, it is kind of vulnerable to removal. there'll be spots where you see their hand and you just take the removal spell. But if you're getting beaten down and then you kind of have to kill the creature and then they just, burst lightning this, then you're kind of sad, right? But you're still getting the information out of it, and you still have some choices there. Also, often you can even if you take the removal spell out of their hand, you can just block the creature. Like Death Touch and Lifelink is pretty nice. In that way, you're still getting a creature off the board, plus you're getting some life back. It's I think this is a pretty nice one actually. It also just kills tokens, right? And at the point where you're killing a token,
another reason to not run Dark Depths, James.
Yeah. And it's nice killing tokens as well, because if you killed a token, so obviously there's nothing under this, then it sort of makes that Death Touch ability better, right? Because it means you're more incentivized to trade it off. There's no creature coming back once you've traded it off. Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty solid addition to most Orzhov decks. As you say, it's not super directional. Sometimes that's a thing we like from our gold cards, is to be a little bit of a signpost to what that color pair is trying to do. This card isn't really that, but it is generically pretty powerful. So not a bad place to be.
Yeah, very solid one. Yeah. Again, if you're doing the generically powerful cubes, I think this one is again going to get tested. Let's take it away with another card, James. Talk to us about King T'Challa.
Yeah, this is a good one. It has loads of text. King
Thank you for reading it, James.
I'm not sure if you're welcome.
Reasonable.
King T'Challa is a white and a blue for a 3/2 legendary creature human noble hero with flash, and whenever a player draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. So kind of like the Fairy Mastermind ability, except it also triggers off you drawing extra cards. And it also has a transform ability. So for 4 a white and a black, 6 mana 4 a white and a blue, so 6 mana total, you can transform King T'Challa, activate only as a sorcery. The other side is Black Panther Hope Enduring. So this you can also just cast straight up on this side for 4 a white and a blue, so the same as the transform cost. And this is a 3/3 legendary creature human warrior hero with flash and double strike. And it says, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Black Panther, and whenever Black Panther deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So a lot going on here. Most of it's pretty powerful, though. The flash effect on the front side, and it is primarily the front side we have to judge this off, because there will just be a lot of games where you don't get to 6. But the flash on the front side plays really well, right? Because it means there's a decent chunk of the time you're just going to get a card on the way in, right? Your opponent untaps, casts a cantrip, you flash this in, that's their second card they drew that turn, because their draw step. And then you get a card right away. And at that point, even if they kill it, you're fairly happy, right? But if they don't play into that, well, it's still not bad, right? Because you still get to just flash it in on their end steps. They don't get to use sorcery speed removal before you untap with it. And then if you can draw any extra cards, and you're playing blue, so why wouldn't you be able to draw extra cards? You're then setting up your own little engine, right? Which is pretty nice. So kind of, yeah, you have the sort of Punisher aspect of the Fairy Mastermind text, but it's also a little self-contained engine, which is really nice. The transform ability in the right spot can be pretty powerful. Because of the damage prevention thing, right? It's that they're never going to have a profitable block on it. And it's, effectively 6 power total of a double strike, right? So basically their options are chump this or take the hit from it. And if they take the hit, they're taking 6 damage and you're drawing 2 cards. Seems very powerful. The tricky bit with the flip part is that it only has that damage prevention text once it has flipped. So if you just sink your 6 mana into this at sorcery speed on your turn and they have a removal spell in response, you're going to be extremely sad. But, in the right spot, it'll be great, but just be very careful about doing that into open mana. Obviously, there'll also be games where, the game's gone long and you just pay 6 mana and cast the other side up front, and that can be very powerful too. You can do that to sort of ambush a creature in combat, can be pretty strong. A lot of modes on this card. I think it's pretty powerful. It'll be worth trying, I think. Blue-white gold cards are the very competitive slots. There's a lot of really good ones.
Yeah.
But this is certainly reasonable to try. I think something like Ang has been seeing a lot of play recently. That's the sort of spell quellery blue-white one. That card is pretty good, but we could try this for a little bit instead and see how it works, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think why I'm kind of okay with this card is I like the fact that it's like an early game, interesting effect, value engine, and also in theory, like your late game control win con as well. Like I could see games where, you're aiming to get this out early to draw you some cards, but just kind of like if you draw it on turn 6, cool, you can either expensive counterspell their whole play or play to the board on their end step, play your big threat, and then you're untapping with a big beefy way of winning the game. I think that's quite strong. Like my personal opinion, just because I do think Azorius is quite stacked, and like I don't think this gets in over like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, or that kind of stuff. But like I think there's a lot of room below the Mitgo Vintage Cube for cards to find play, and I think this will be a very good one for a lot of cubes, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Also, how you're going to play this card is going to depend on the matchup quite a lot. Because some color combinations are going to be really bad at answering a creature that can't be dealt damage. Like, imagine you're playing against red-green, right? The flip side of this is just in play forever. There is no way it can leave. So in that scenario, but red-green is obviously very good at killing a 3/2. So in that scenario, you might try your best to try and hold this until you can get to 6, and then you just flash it in and ask them how they're going to deal with it.
I think they concede, to be honest, James.
Oh, that seems like a reasonable approach, yeah.
Yeah, it will work. Nice, yeah. King T'Challa, I think a very cool one. Right, let's keep it going. Next up, we have Okoye, Mighty and Adored. This is 2 green and a white for a 3/3 legendary creature, human warrior hero. It has, when it enters, you become the monarch, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1 counter on target creature. Whenever that creature attacks the monarch this turn, it gains double strike and trample until end of turn. So this is actually quite a powerful card. The monarchy is very, very good. You tend to only see it in the highest power level cubes. Actually, for those unaware, the monarchy basically means that you draw a card at the monarch draws a card at their end step, and then whenever they take combat damage, the person who dealt the damage becomes the monarch. For those unaware, but just that card advantage is very, very strong. And the monarch, like the initiative, was not made for single player. It was made for multiplayer. That's kind of one of the reasons why this card and this effect is very, very strong. We generally only see the monarchy in like small sprinklings, because if you run too much of it, it kind of becomes what the cube is doing. It's very similarly with the initiative. Like the odd kind of card here, like your Palace Jailer is okay, but if there's too much monarchy, it really helps the decks that are very good at being aggressive to the board, which is not the decks that need help nowadays. Like, if you thought Boros aggro was a bit good already, don't add the monarchy to the cube, because you're basically giving the aggro deck card draw. And this card, I think, is quite strong in that, because effectively what you're doing is you're playing this 4-drop, and you're asking your opponent, do you want to give me a card every turn, or do you want to give me a 5/5 double strike, which will then become a 6/6 double strike, which will take the monarchy back anyway. I think this card is quite strong. Also it being in Selesnya means that it's not competing against that many other generically like high-powered cards. Like my my main PSA for this card will probably be quite cheap. This will probably be like a 10, 20p card. Do not put it in a budget cube. Do not put it in a lower powered environment. This kind of card and the Monarchy need to be kept in high powered environments where there is other Monarchy cards where you are trying to push that power level. Do you think that's fair, James, or am I kind of going a bit too ham on the Monarchy on this card?
I think you're disrespecting my boy Knight of the Reliquary a little bit. I'll have you know the competition is fierce for the Selesnya gold slots. No, this card's quite powerful. The Monarchy is very good if you can keep it. This, assuming it lives, is certainly going to be excellent at taking it back if your opponent does happen to get it. It's not, I think, anywhere near the power level of something like a Palace Jailer, because the big thing about Palace Jailer, right, is it removes their creature from a board, adds a body to the board, and even if they kill the Palace Jailer, they still don't have their creature back. So it makes it incredibly challenging for them to actually regain the Monarchy, because it's inherently such a big swing on the board right then. This is great at taking the Monarchy back when it lives, but if they just kill this, attack you, take the Monarchy, you're potentially in a tough spot, right? That being said, removal is good against creatures. That's fine. We can live with that. This one's really powerful. You can have other creatures that take the Monarchy back if this dies. In like a Selesnya aggressive leaning deck, which is honestly probably what Selesnya should be doing in most cubes, this looks quite nice. Like, getting this out on turn 3 seems pretty good. Not like up there with the premium Monarchy cards, but certainly a really good option for your Selesnya gold card in most sort of reasonably high power level cubes, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. All right, we're moving on to Colourless now. James, take it away with Galactus, Devourer of Worlds. Yeah,
Galactus is a big lad, isn't he?
He's a big boy. Yeah. He's a big boy.
Not to weight shame anyone, but he is pretty chunky. Galactus, Devourer of Worlds is 10 generic mana for a 12/12 legendary creature Elder Alien. He has Flying, Trample, and Indestructible, and when Galactus enters, exile target permanent. There's also a bunch of nonsense text under the title of Insatiable Hunger that says, Galactus attacks an opponent with the most life amongst your opponents each combat if able, unless you control a creature named Silver Surfer Galactus's Herald. You can shortcut all of that to Galactus attacks each turn if able. That's fine. I was going to attack with my 12/12 anyway. This is pretty powerful as the facets go. It's going to be a pretty strong thing to cheat into play with most of the ways we like cheating things into play. So obviously the cards this is quite reminiscent of with the big colorless cost is the Eldrazi Titans, right? Your Emrakul's, Rulamogs, etc. But one nice difference with this, firstly, it can go to the graveyard, so it works via reanimation stuff, whereas those old Eldrazi Titans have the trigger where if they go to the graveyard, they shuffle back into your library, whereas this just works with your Animate Deads, your Necromancies, all that good stuff. It's also nice that the exile target permanent trigger is an ETB rather than a cast trigger like it is with the Titans. So again,
yeah, I think that's quite big actually. Yeah.
So if you're reanimating or if you're like oathing into this, for example, or you're feeling adventurous and casting Eureka, you are going to get that trigger, right? Plus, on top of all of this, it works with Channel, which is kind of the classic thing you can do with the big color stuff. I think this is pretty good. I also like that, unlike with some similar things we've got recently, like Summon Bakhmut, for example, that this does the trigger can exile lands. We've had a few of these where it's been non-land permanent recently, and that means that if you really turbo it out, sometimes you don't have a good thing to exile, whereas this can always get that land. The only, I guess, axis on which this isn't amazing is something like flash or sneak attack even, you're getting that exile trigger. Sure, if it's a sneak attack, you're getting in for 12. That's good, but you probably don't deal much other damage in those decks, so it's not amazing. It's not that it's bad, but there are just better options for those decks. But I think in general, this is one that's going to perform pretty well in most cubes. Like, listen, it's not Archon of Cruelty, it's not Atraxa, but we play a bunch which are significantly worse than that, because you do need, if you're trying to support all these different ways of cheating big stuff into play, you do need some redundancy in your big stuff. And to me, I think this probably will make the cut in a lot of cubes.
Yeah, of all the big dumb idiots, I think this is the one I like the most. Kind of like you mentioned, like Archon and like Atraxa there. Kind of like why those have gone in cubes is because they're big idiots, but they also give you a bunch of card advantage as well. And we generally want some kind of we generally want like some kind of big ETB as well. Like answering something is good, but just this, for me, actually, this having indestructible, I think, is quite big, because it means that they can't just, like, yes, they can path it. Okay, I get that, but like it means they can't just like Doomblade it the moment it comes in. Like it's a big dumb idiot you're cheating into play and has a high probability of sticking around and actually doing the thing that you want your big dumb idiot to do. It's going to come in and it's going to be turned sideways and attack. And I think that's quite good. If I was out shopping for a big dumb idiot, I think this, for just power and toughness and going on the board and being turned sideways, I quite like it.
Yeah, for sure. Lots going for it. Good keywords as well.
Yeah. All right, but let's keep it going. Next up, we have Iron Man Armor. This is 3 generic for an artifact equipment with, when this equipment enters, attach it to target creature you control. It has equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has flying, and it has pay 2 generic. If this equipment isn't a creature, it becomes a 0/0 construct hero artifact creature with flying, and this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control until end of turn, and it has equip 2. So I like this. I think it's an interesting card. 3 mana to buff up a creature and give it flying doesn't really get us into the highest power cubes anymore. But the activated ability for me is where this gets really interesting. Like, from a rules point of view, how this will basically work is, if it's equipped, we can pay 2 mana to have it unequip, and it will become a creature. And we can then hit our opponents with that if we need to split our attacks, which is quite cool. And because when this is unequipped, I think I like this oddly more unequipped than I do equipped. Because when it's unequipped, effectively it's 3 mana for a flying construct token. And in our last episode, we talked a lot about how kind of like the blue artifact decks are effectively, or like in Powered Cube, are trying to put as many artifacts into play as possible. And one of the ways they benefit from that is by making construct tokens and turning them sideways. This, in theory, is the best construct token because it's a flying construct token. Like, jumping a creature is fine, but I do think you'll be using that ability more than you think of taking it off and attacking with it when it can attack. Because effectively, the turn it comes in, it's buffing up one creature, you hit him with that creature, then next turn you take it off and then attack with a massive creature. Because like oddly, like if you have a board of artifacts, you kind of want this to be unequipped because you don't get the artifact buff. If it's equipped, it will only ever be +2/+1 and flying. Like in my cube already, and in my cube where I'm pushing the artifact aggro deck, but also in the Mitgo Vintage cube where they're not, they still run a card like Nettlecyst, and I think this is just better. Like Nettlecyst is like comes in with a germ token and is just power and toughness equal to number of artifacts you control. This can have flying. Like, I think this is quite a neat swap. What do you think of Iron Man Armor, James?
I think it's less good than Nettlecyst. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but it's that continuous mana investment to make it into the construct that puts me off. I'm not gonna prioritize activating this over casting my spells during the next few turns after I've played this, right? And sure, that's fine if I've got it attached to something where the +2/+1 and flying is really impactful, but I think there will be some games where I run this out if it's not attached to something where it matters too much, or if I kill the creature it's attached to, and then the next few turns my mana is tied up doing other things, and I'm not putting it into activating this, and then it ends up just sitting in play, not doing anything for a few turns too many. I think a bit too much of a time is my hunch. Not that it's a bad card, but I think in most of my aggro decks, I would rather have a Nestle Cyst where it's just I just put my 3 mana in, and now it's a threat on its own. I don't need to do anything else to it. And then, sure, if they kill it, then I can pay 2 mana once to re-equip it.
That's fair. No, I do agree with that. I like Dental Cyst. Like, just one thing for me is there's always been a bit of a tension point in the more aggressive version. Like I think the conversation on what's better for the go wide version, I think what you're saying makes more. I see it more for me in the aggressive version. The Nettle Cyst not being an artifact creature itself, there is a tension point there because it doesn't get buffed up by certain effects. You can't put a counter on it with like Steel Overseer, that kind of stuff. Whereas the Construct Iron Man thing will be an artifact, so there is something there. Like it's probably not one where one is always technically better, but they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. But I think this is like I think as a testing point, I think swapping it for testing purposes, I think will be perfectly fine, and then seeing which one you like, I think is a good shout.
Sure. And if you're leaning into the aggressive go wide artifact thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other either.
Both of them, James. I can run both in my Scorpus Lord deck. You thought you got away from me.
Literally, and no one can stop you, Dan.
I think the thing that will be stopping me testing Iron Man's armor is probably the price. Let's have a look. Oh, okay. $7 at time of recording. Love that for me. All right, let's keep it going. We have one more artifact, James. A card that people are saying may break Vintage in half. Talk to us about the Fantastica.
I have no knowledge of Vintage. I'm still going to stake my reputation on it not faking Vintage. Feel free to taunt me about that in the coming months. Yeah, the Fantastica is 3 generic mana for a 4/4 legendary artifact vehicle. It has flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may have the Fantastica become an artifact creature until end of turn. And whenever you cast your 4th non-creature spell each turn, you may sacrifice the Fantastica. If you do, create 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature tokens with flying and haste. So this promises to do a lot. You really do need to be triggering this very reliably every turn, at least the first non-creature spell. I'm just a bit worried about what your deck is actually going to look like, where you're so reliably casting non-creature spells every turn, and yet this kind of wants to go in an aggressive deck, right? So presumably we have some creatures as well. I could just see you getting a bit screwed some games, and you cast this and it just sits there and doesn't do anything for a few turns. Because this does not have a crew cost, right? There's no backup plan here. If you're not casting non-creature spells, it is not a card. And it very rarely blocks, right? Is relevant. And but because you'd have to cast an instant on their turn to make it be a creature on their turn. The 4th non-creature spell thing, I think, is really tough. In not that you can never cast 4 non-creature spells in a turn in Cube, but the decks that do that tend to not be decks that want an undercosted 4/4, right? So unless your whole game plan is around trying to trigger that 4th spell, which seems a bit tricky, I think that's not something we're going to be doing all the time. Like, sure, it'll come up if you have all the baubles and you draw all your cards in the right order. Great. You will get a few free wins off of that, but I don't think it's enough for me to want to want the card. I know the ceiling's high on this. Like, 3 mana 4/4 flying is just huge. I'm sure there will be decks where this is strong, but I'm a little bit skeptical sort of in the aggregate here. I think there might just be a few games too many where this sits there and doesn't do anything.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. For me, I don't like this at all as just a card in my Spellslinger deck. Like, I would much rather any of the Spellslinger cards that like make me a token, because I'm going to get more of them over the course of the game than this. Like the ones that make tokens, those tokens will keep me alive until I can grow my board state and do bigger things. Whereas this is just like, I don't care about in my Spellslinger deck, kind of like getting in for 4 every other turn will be nice, but I do need to block every now and then. Like, for me, if this is getting into a cube, it's because you are really leaning into that bottom ability of, effectively, this is, and I'm going to get yelled at, my second like copy of Tendrils of Agony. James is laughing. It's going to be fine, guys. It's going to be James is laughing. It's going to be fine. And I know that is a very hard sell, because effectively, well, there's 2 points where it's a hard sell. Firstly, we have to storm off and then untap. Not traditionally where the storm deck wants to be, but if you can do it with instants, you can do it on your opponent's turn and then untap with your board of flying 4/4s. And that could be a way of winning. The second part is that I feel specifically people who like Storm will specifically hate a card called the Fantastica. But to bring it back together, like, yeah, for me, I don't want this as a Spellslinger card. For me, this is a kind of this is a combo win con. Just looking at it and that spectrum, James, what do you think about this?
I think it's dreadful in that spectrum.
Okay.
Because if you're trying to do the combo Storm thing, you want to cast all your spells, cast your rituals, and then the last card you play is when you actually have mana to spend on your win condition, right? You want, because that's when you've like tutored and everything, and you flashed back all your nonsense with your Yawgmoth's Will. We might have cast our 4th non-creature spell already, in which case this doesn't do anything. We have to have this in play when we cast the 4th one, right?
Yeah.
And even then, it's not even 20 power, right? It's not necessarily killing in one hit. You might have to untap twice, which is kind of tough. Honestly, I feel like I'd rather have Empty the Warrens. And Empty the Warrens is not very good.
No, I'm gonna say this is better. I will stake my reputation on this card being better than Empty the Warrens. In terms of, okay, there is a world where we could just make a perfect Storm deck and just put individual win cons in and see how it goes. So what was the... I think this card was actually banned in Standard, but Ignite Memories, 4 and a red, target player reveals a card at random from their hand, deals damage equal to that player, equal to that card's converted mana cost, and it has got Storm. Like, come on, I think this is better than that. For me anyway, like if you support this, I don't think 4 non-creature spells is that hard, because effectively it's 2 cards with flashback.
It's not that you can't do it. It's more that I don't think it's what I want to be building my deck around, you know? I guess where I could see it, right, is you were kind of a Storm deck and you didn't really get there. And you can sometimes like run this out on turn 3, and then if they don't kill it, you can untap and like do the thing, and you go like, you know, Ritual Manamorphose, play a card, draw spell, play a card, draw spell. Like, I didn't actually have my full Storm thing, but I still got to put a bunch of power and toughness into play, and and in a decent amount of the games, that will be good enough. The issue I have, right, is that a lot of games, the Storm deck takes a long time to set up. And then if you're saying you need to untap this, like, you run this out, and then if they just kill it, then it's, what's your deck do, you know? I really want to donate slots to stuff like that, right? I want all my slots to be geared towards the thing which definitely wins me the game, where I have my 6th turn and I cast my Brain Freeze, or I cast my Tendrils of Agony, right? And they can't interact with that almost ever, right? There's not interaction for Tendrils of Agony in most cubes, whereas there very much is for this card.
Yeah. I do agree. I think they will see it. Oh, they will see this coming because you've played it. But but for me, I think it's more that is the conversation of where it is. Like I don't think this gets in at all as less of a value creature. And if it's not getting in as a combo card, then I guess it doesn't get there in there either as well. Would you say this is worse or better than Noise Marine?
I need to remind myself what Noise Marine does.
Noise Marine was the other card I said could be an alternate Storm win condition. That's 4 and a red for a 3/2 creature Astartes warrior with Cascade, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn to any target. As a Stormwind con, James.
As a Stormwind con, I think they're both pretty grim.
Okay.
In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only mediocre Stormwind conditions. I think they're both a tough way to do it. I think I prefer Noise Marine because
yes,
because you can't just kill it with a removal spell, you know?
Okay, reasonable. All right, fun card anyway. I think definitely worth a discussion because a bunch of the wife plays Vintage, and I know that this was people were worried for a hot minute that they're going to have to run this bad boy. All right, we have one last card for our set review. Last up, well, actually, that's a lie. It's not one card. It's 5 cards. We have a cycle of lands. Last up, I'll read the Azorius one. It's Gleaming Bastion. It's a land that comes into play untapped. It taps for a colourless, and it taps for a white and a blue. Activate only if a land entered this turn or if you control a basic land. So there is a cycle of allied pairs in this set. And these seem pretty solid. Like, I don't think they're going to get into the top tier of lands in Cube. Kind of like we should probably do an episode as and when, James. It's just on like the how are we tiering lands in high powered cubes, because I think we're basically set on fetch, duel, shock, survival, the surveil land, and then I quite like fast lands. And then if you want to go down an extra one, maybe like, I know the Mitgo Vintage Cube is creature lands. I kind of like to go for like a little bit like, what is the deck doing? So like my like 5th or 6th like Azorius land is like an artifact land because I'm doing artifacts. But there's a lot of room in terms of cubes below that in terms of like what you create, because, dear listener, the fetch lands in my cube are likely to be proxies. The jewels are 100% proxies. If you're building a cube for real and you like proxies, these might be a solid shout. Like, I think these are like, they don't really have a massive downside. Like, on turn 1, they will you can play your Mother of Runes off this card. It's if you don't follow it up with a basic, that's when you kind of get a bit turned off on lands. But they're not coming into play untapped. All they ask is that you have basics in your deck, and like, unless you're like guys, these probably aren't as good in maybe the 3-color deck. You could get screwed there. But in any 2-color deck, these seem like quite good lands with no real downside. I guess the colors as well. If you're doing Eldrazi, hooray! You have another source of colorless in your deck, but that's quite rare nowadays. Not too much more to say, maybe. But what do you think of the cycle of lands, James?
Yeah, I think they're going to be really good in 2-color decks. But one thing to be aware of is if you cut other jewels for these, you're really discouraging a sort of 4 or 5-color deck from existing. Because these basically aren't playable in those decks. You're just not going to have enough basics. But in most other cases, these are going to be pretty solid.
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of like, I'm seeing it in like a cube that isn't doing fetch lands from a budget point of view would be my gut. Because in that environment, you want as many fetchable ones. So even like maybe the tap lands that can be fetched might be better. Like I think Tango lands or the cycling lands perhaps from Amonkhet. Just because you can find them, they might be better. But if you don't have fetch lands, I think these are going to be very solid. All right, marvellous. So that's going to do it for our set review. But we have a couple of things to touch on before we get you all out of here. Firstly, I think is the bit we always do, is cards that we're playing. So me and James, I was going to quickly touch on cards that we're thinking of testing, maybe in some of our cubes. Like, personally, I think Moleman, Moloid Master is definitely worth the test. The green kind of alternate ramming up excavator we touched on in this episode. I think that one I might potentially test in my unpowered vintage cube. I think that one could be quite good there. In my Treat Yourself cube, I'm thinking of Undead Hand Ninja and Grim Reaper's Scythe. I'm thinking of testing those because I'm really going ham with like the Insidious Roots deck, and these are better than some of the options that we've had previously. Kind of like it's a newish archetype. We're getting better tools for it, so I think those could be fun. I think Black Widow Super Spy is just a very strong magic card. And I think, just like Menace Growing Creatures, I think have been quite strong. Like, the one I want to play with, and I want to play this in one of your cubes, James, I want to play Doctor Doom Unrivaled, the sort of Doomsday Labman win con. I want to play that in your dual commander cube. That seems like a lot of fun. Having this in the command zone seems cool.
Yeah, despite being slightly rude about that card as a Doomsday win con in our last episode, I think for Commander Cube, where you can have that in your command zone, and I am trying to make Doomsday a thing, I think it's probably worth an include there. It's also kind of interesting to me to put it under an Agatha Soul Cauldron. And I think there's some interesting Doomsday files you can make. So yeah, I'm interested in that one for Dual Commander Cube. Also for Dual Commander Cube, I'm quite interested in Ironheart Clever Champion. That's the non-creature spells you cast have Improvise, the blue one.
Oh, that one's very cool. Yeah,
I think that could be a cool commander. For Powered Cube, I think Wondrous Wasp is quite interesting. That's for the 2-mana 2/1 flyer where we tap something down. I think Black Widow is generically a pretty strong card. And the Hawkeye I think is quite good. I think King T'Challa is quite strong. There are a couple of other ones I'm sure are fine. Galactus, I think I'm almost certainly going to include because I think it's just better than some of the other colorless options. I will say from like a sort of flavory perspective, I don't love all the superhero stuff. So when it's kind of close, I'm probably going to choose one that isn't a superhero. But that's entirely just a me thing. Mole Man I think is also certainly worth a test in probably both of those cubes, just because the Crucible is quite strong, and yeah, especially for Dual Commander, because having a legendary Crucible is something we don't have previously. Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's quite hot. Yeah.
Honestly, might be a bit cracked with Stream Mine. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess that kind of does like. It brings us onto something we kind of wanted to talk about, but we wanted to leave it to the end, and that's kind of like our thoughts on the set and kind of some of the implications, I guess, for the set in terms of how it's gonna affect Cube or and how it's going to affect Cube and kind of like how cubes are being built. Because like we were already thinking of doing this section, but then we saw some comments after the first episode and kind of like thought this was worth doing. But kind of like initially, so just some thoughts on the set is there's so many legendary creatures in this set. James, I have the number in front of me. How many legendary creatures do you think are in over all the products? So I'm including the main set, the Commander set, and the Jumpstart product.
It's going to be over 100, I think.
Yes.
I don't know how many cards there are. I think it seems like about 20% of the cards are legendary creatures. Probably more.
There's 653 first printings in this set. 371 of them are legendary creatures.
That's insane.
That's about half. That's an incredibly large number. And like that's had a number of effects. From a cube building point of view, it means that the Legendary Matters deck has got a lot better. It has got a massive boost from this set because it primarily has meant that basically with this set, they've had to take effects that you would normally have for a set. But in this set, they've just given us that, but on legendary creatures. So last time we touched on like the legendary deck running cards like Yoshimaru, Mox Amber, and also a card like Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard, as well as like a bunch of cards from Lord of the Rings that all like buff up legendary creatures or reward you or protect your legendary creatures. There is so much more for this deck now that it's probably going to be quite a flushed out archetype after this set alone. Like my gut is that it's a Naya deck. Because that's kind of like it's a creature-based deck. Naya is quite good at creatures. My gut's kind of that's kind of where it is. That's where all the support for is right now. But that is going to be a full flush-out archetype that I think you will actually be able to support quite easily because if a bunch of our creatures in Cube are going to be generically legendary now, it's not that hard to just put in a couple of legendary payoffs and for them to be worth it. For me, though, the biggest downside of this set and like the rise of so many legendary creatures is that just like we try not to be negative about them when they come up, but there's a bunch of cards in this set that just actively annoy me. like cards like Night Nurse, Hammerhead, Magia Boss, and like Mole Man. Like they actively annoy me because they're just versions of these are cards that we've already seen. But it's like I do feel a bit sorry that, or I'm sympathetic to a point because it felt like they had to make 371 legendary creatures, and it's like, well, we haven't got any ideas. Let's just take one that already exists and make it slightly better and put it in this set. That and like give it a like I'm not fussed about like a tertiary Marvel villain, and now that kind of like the best sacrifice outlet in Black potentially is a tertiary Marvel villain. If I want the most optimal cube, I'm going to have to consider running these cards. What do you think about that, James?
Yeah, this is, I think, pretty clearly a trend we're going to see continue for at least the next year or two, right? I think it sort of pushes you into a little bit of a decision as a cube designer if, like us, you're not wild about this from a sort of flavor perspective, or just for a direction for Magic, then even when you're building cubes where that wasn't the main focus, you kind of either have to be chill with it and that becomes a lot of what the cube is, or decide to do something else, which is fine. Like, that's the upside of cube, right? You get to do whatever you want with it. And you don't have to say, oh, I'm not having any Marvel Spider-Man cards. You just put in the ones you like. You know, it's fine. But it will push you. If you're someone who is not looking at the flavor or whatever it's called, then yes, most cubes will become very much. Here's a bunch of there will be a lot of Marvel dudes. There'll be a lot of Legendary Lord of the Rings dudes. Caracas is going to be the best card in the world, and we go from there. And like, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. It's personal taste, right? I don't love it. I haven't been loving the mutant turtle dudes. I don't love the Marvel stuff. It's fine. Like, everyone has different taste. I think the way Magic is gone is you've just got to be okay with that and engage with the bits of Magic you do enjoy. And yeah, as I say, that's the great thing about Cube, right? We can pick which cards we play with if you build your own cube. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's one of the reasons that why I've focused more on cube over the last couple of years than like Commander or any other format, because I can make the format that I want. But like I do think it will be a thing of, because like the Mitgo Vintage Cube and like the Arena Cube, which in theory will be how still the most majority of people will interact with Cube, they will still have all these cards because they are trying to showcase them. I think what you'll generally see is a bit of a split between cubes people make in paper maybe and cubes that cubes that are online, because I not the biggest Final Fantasy fan. I wasn't the biggest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan, but I have cards from those sets in my cube because the cards themselves were cool, and I'm a Magic fan. But I think it's just, but in terms of the number, like the proportion is way lower. Like I'm fine with a little sprinkling. Like honestly, like I didn't actually mention it, but like the card I could see myself adding because I found out it was quite cheap is Iron Man Armor. Like I quite like that card. Having like one Iron Man, like a little sprinkling is okay. I think for me, it's like, if I look at the Mitgo Vintage Cube in like a couple of years and it's like all named characters from franchises I'm not as hot on, then that will be sad for me. For some people, again, it will be awesome. Like we have friends who like the flavor of the card means nothing. For them, it's just a play piece. And for some people, will be like that. And for some people, will have everything. Yeah, I think it's a roundabout saying of it's a roundabout way of saying like, thank God we play Cube where we can do what we want with it.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I think that makes it a bit more of an issue after this set than the Turtle set, right, is that this is just a higher power level set. There's not many Turtles cards I'm expecting to see in a bunch of powered cubes still in like 3 years, you know? Whereas there are a few cards in this set, I think we probably will.
No, I would agree. And yeah, we wanted to put this at the end of the episode because we have seen the comments and our views are kind of similar to a lot of people out there. But also, if you love Marvel and this is like your gateway in and like, oh, what's this format cube? We don't want you to start an episode where it just is two British lads complaining about how warm it is and how much they don't like this. Because like I still like Magic and there are some cool cards in this set. And yeah, I'm excited to cube with a number of them like I am with any set. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could not agree more.
All right, awesome. Well, that's going to do it for our episode. I'm going to do it for today. James, pleasure, man. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Nice one. It just leaves me to thank you all very much for listening. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.